Hey, welcome back to T Mike's React. I got a special request from a subscriber about the Cabbage Patch video clip that it was in the last video. So I figured I'd put together a little something, especially for this subscriber. So in these videos, we'll be looking at some strange and disturbing videos that will make you question what you thought you already knew. If I can get you guys to like, comment, subscribe, it'll mean the world to me. Without any further ado, let's get into the video.
Oh my days. Now this is how you can rewrite history with the orphan trains. So the orphan train movement was a supervised welfare program that transported children from crowded eastern cities of the United States to foster homes located largely in the rural areas of the Midwest. The orphan trains operated between 1854 and 1929, relocating about 250,000 children. So let's do the maths. Imagine when these children grow up, they have 2 or 3 children of their own. Let's say 250,000 times 3. You're looking at 750,000 adults that had their names changed and their place of birth changed. How would you know who's who? Or how would you know who you really are? By the looks of it, this was big business. And of course, there was corruption. And what I want to know is, where was all the parents? You see, it's not hard to rewrite history. All you need to do is get rid of all the parents and elders, relocate the children, and you can teach them anything, and they will believe you.
Pay attention. We're building.
Have y'all ever heard about these Cabbage Patch kids? This story holds so many dark mysteries. Now, in your Cabbage Patch story, your farmer would plant his seeds in the ground, and he would water them and watch them grow. And these rich people would go out in a Cabbage Patch field and pick whatever baby they want. All of your Cabbage Patch kids was kept together until given a family. There was a point of time when everybody around the world wanted a Cabbage Patch kid. Now this is where it gets spooky at. Your Cabbage Patch kids will have a real hospital where they was born at. The Cabbage Patch kids' birthplace is said to be in Cleveland, Georgia. Like, do y'all hear what I'm saying, family? These is like some real little voodoo dolls. It remind me of Chucky. And this hospital in Cleveland, Georgia was said to be like a foster care service. They had thousands of little kids running around. But these wasn't your everyday kids that you see.
Where they get these
Said to be
kids from?
orphan children that needed to be adopted. It was said that their parents were strung out or too busy working their jobs. But this was too many kids, like way too many. Now legend has it that America is ancient Egypt, and we had an ancient Egyptian empire over here in the United States way before the colonizers got over here. And the colonizers would raid the land and take all of our artifacts. Now back in the 1800s, these trains would go from the east to the west. And during this time, new states was being bought over here in America, like the Louisiana Purchase. And we was expanding to the west. And most theories have it that no people lived over here in this area. So this train system was set up to repopulate the west coast with the Cabbage Patch kids. And this train that these babies was riding on was said to be a real incubator. And this train or incubator will assist them in life, giving that spark to them. Have y'all ever heard of children of the corn or children of the crop? It's the Cabbage Patch kids. They are the crops. Now this is the old postcard that have been floating around with many orphans that need a home. And the card say repose population. It's the population tank, family. And here at the top, you will see grains and seeds being put into a mechanical device. He will crank up this machine and start the process. It's the spirals of life. He is creating the cycles of time. And these Cabbage Patch kids will be born. And the woman will catch these babies. These kids will grow and they will drop from out of her dress and learn to crawl in this physical matrix.
What y'all think
Play with
about
the
this so
crop.
far?
They played with the seed to create a new type of being.
Now he got a
New
point.
product What you see down here
He's a little
is
off
called the
though.
Cabbage Patch Kids. I know it's a crazy story, but I hope y'all like the lecture. Love and wholeness.
These videos are for entertainment purposes only. Don't forget.
Between 1854 and 1929, an estimated 250,000 children were taken from East Coast cities in the U.S. and sent across the country on trains to be adopted by strangers. These are known as the orphan trains. The official story says the cities, like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, were overrun with poor, homeless, or orphaned kids. Philanthropic groups, like the Children's Aid Society, were trying to save them. Trains took these children to new homes in the Midwest and West to give them better lives. Families would literally pick them out at train stops, sometimes like livestock. Now here's where it gets. They were called the orphan trains and were told they were just poor kids from overcrowded cities. But the numbers don't add up. They weren't just hundreds, they were hundreds of thousands. And here's the real mystery. Where were all the adults? Why were cities nearly empty? Why were beautiful buildings left behind but the population missing? Some believe this was part of a global reset, a period where a previous civilization vanished and a new one was planted. These orphans weren't just relocated. They were reprogrammed, raised without ancestral memory, given a new story, taught a new version of the past. It wasn't just adoption, it was assimilation. The orphan trains weren't just about charity, they were about control. Because if you reset the children, you reset the future.
Do you really believe what they tell you? Have you heard of the orphan trains? It was a covert operation to repopulate and reshape the American Midwest. This is as dark and scary as it sounds. Between 1854 and 1929, the United States was experiencing massive waves of immigration that
Not
was
that
flooding
far
into
ago.
urban areas. There was a need to spread the population more evenly across the country, not only to alleviate the overcrowded cities, but also to exert control over areas in America. So, the U.S. government came up with a plan. They took over 250,000 orphaned and homeless children from New York City
There's
and other
that number,
urban areas,
250.
placed them on trains, and sent them to rural towns across America. This plan was sold to the public as giving these children a fresh start, but the reality was much darker and more complex. Many of these children simply vanished. Over 100,000 children disappeared as soon as they stepped onto those trains. Was this just a result of poor record keeping, or is there a more sinister story behind these missing children?
What do y'all think? Let's keep going. Let's keep going. We're building.
In the 1850s, just after the last reset, there began a massive push to reintroduce technology, culture, and even people to the world. World's fairs had these massive exhibits called live infant incubators. These exhibits were insanely popular, drawing millions of visitors. They even had nurses in uniforms acting like caretakers. The babies weren't premature. They were being artificially gestated. This wasn't just a medical breakthrough. This was unfathomably advanced technology. Artificial wombs, mass baby production. Sounds a whole lot like a new world being repopulated after something big went down.
In the 1800s.
I'll
Think
let
about
you
it.
tell the story of the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Right, so you've got the Tartarian Empire wiped out. So we had lots of civil wars. We had lots of
Do you see how things keep coming back in full circle? We come back to the Tartarian Empire. Something that they said was not real, did not exist, but it shows up on all the ancient maps. All the way up into the early 1900s. When they, well, let's keep going. We're talking about something totally different, but let's keep going.
catastrophes considered to be natural, like fires and floods. We had famines and genocide, acts of genocide as well. So the population throughout the entire world has been dramatically reduced. The aim being, as you touched on earlier on, was to make out as if the indigenous people and black people were primitive, and that white people were the superior and dominant race that invented and created everything. So in
Actually,
order for
that's
that to
the
actually
reverse.
work, they needed to repopulate. So the people with pale skin,
Pale skin.
they were killed or they were incarcerated. So you'll see after 1776, lots of prisons, asylums, and orphanages open. Now, you could be considered insane because your husband died in battle. So let's say the Napoleonic Wars, millions of people are dead, and the Civil Wars, Russia in particular, you've got a lot of women, a lot of widows with children. Losing your husband in battle was one of the reasons you could be sectioned. The children become property of the state and they start shipping them around, but they need more. They've got to rebuild an
CPS.
infrastructure. These children are going to work on farms, they're going to mine, and then we're going to see the Industrial Revolution. So they're going to be working in factories and sweatshops. So how they go about that, it is alleged, is that they cloned a mass cloning exercise called the Cabbage Patch Babies. And this was spearheaded following a series of short films that were made by someone called Alice Guy Blache, a French pioneer filmmaker who brought out a film called The Cabbage Patch Fairy and then The Midwife to the Upper Classes. And this depicted, a black and white movie, this depicted couples going and actually purchasing babies from cabbage patches, demonstrating that they were grown and following old Slavic folklore that babies come from cabbages and you find them in the bottom of the garden. And it's so in plain sight, they're showing you a mass repopulation program. They were then sent through baby farms and through the orphan train movement and distributed all over the world. Some were sent to Australia from the UK. We're told that it was convicts that were sent. It wasn't. The cages are too small.
So this is worldwide.
The cages were child size, like puppy crates. So they distributed children throughout the world, and then all of a sudden they were put on display and classed as premature babies in all of the world's fairs and expositions throughout the world as well, and you could buy them. And one of the particular adverts that Dr. Martin Cooney, who started the incubator babies, was that we can grow a 9-month-old baby in 1 week. So they had some serious technology going there, and
wow.
you could buy them. So children were being taken from their parents, redistributed throughout the world. This was also happening to indigenous children as well. Children were being brought over from Africa. Children were being taken from Native American tribes and families. And these weren't primitive by any stretch of the imagination. They were far more advanced than anybody realizes. So they repopulated. So the mass cloning exercise was called the Cabbage Patch Babies. And a series of postcards came out to promote that. They're also known as repopulation postcards. And that happened late 1800s, early 1900s. So there you go. It's a bit of a...
Wow, it's incredible. So, I mean, taking all these indigenous populations of children and then moving them around into different areas, different countries,
feeding them what they want them to
reseeding the
know.
planet, a new reset.
Yeah, I mean, in America alone, the orphan train movement, and this is what they state, so you can double this normally, but the official figure is 250 children were taken from orphanages in the streets of New York and distributed across the Midwest of America to work on farms and in mines. So you can double that to 500,000. We were then sending children from Russia, which was really the most heavily populated part of Tartaria, of the empire. Children from Russia were being sent all over the place. Ukraine, which was Crimea, all of the children from there were taken. So they'd go in, have a war,
which was part of Russia,
children, redistribute them, force them to speak English, change their surname, and give them a new historical narrative. This is what happened, this is where you're from, and you're imagining that. And if you didn't comply, you went to a re-education centre.
Re-education,
as an asylum.
Public school
and they had
system.
a lot of child asylums as well.
Same thing.
So you've got to think, all of these world fairs,
Indoctrination,
the asylums, the prisons and the orphanages all pop up at the same time, along with the Lunacy Act, just after all of the civil wars and the atrocities that occurred. And this all happened after 1776.
I never posted
Brainwashing and whitewashing exercise, and they have literally whitewashed history, made out that white people are superior,
whitewashed,
and that the white people were the true forefathers of America, and the people that had the capability and the intelligence to build these incredible structures. It's a lie.
It's a lie.
An absolute lie. It's the other way round, entirely the other way round.
Yeah.
Pay attention. We're building, y'all. You wanted to know? Now you know.
Orphan trains.
He's going to break it down.
Populate after the reset.
The reset.
It was March 15th, 1906. The train pulling into the eastern Iowa town of Hopkinton that morning would have attracted an unusual amount of attention. Townspeople would have stopped what they were doing to watch. Shop owners would have stood in their doorways as the locomotive slowed near the depot. A notice placed in the Hopkinton newspaper days earlier had described the upcoming arrival of a company of orphan children. It said, "The object of the coming of these children is to find homes in your midst, especially among farmers, where they may enjoy a happy and wholesome family life, where kind care, good example, and moral training will fit them for a life of self-support and usefulness."
That's the cover for Slave.
Inside the train that day,
Indentured
8
servant.
children would have peered out the windows, wondering about this place so far from New York. The group soon made its way off the train and down the block to the Hotel Hopkinton. After changing into the finer clothes they had been given, they were escorted to the nearby Masonic Lodge, where a group had gathered to see the children being offered.
Masonic
The boys
Lodge.
and girls were asked to stand and sing a song, recite poetry, anything that might endear them to the crowd. By the time the gathering had ended, each of the 8 children had gone home with a different set of strangers. Between 1854 and 1929, this scene played out many times across the United States, particularly in the Midwest. These trips, which
Less than
essentially
100
amounted
years
to the
ago.
resettlement of 250,000 children, were later collectively described.
All right, let me paint you guys a picture here.
Break it down.
The orphan train movement in the 1800s was spearheaded by Charles Loring Brace and the Children's Aid Society, transporting orphaned and disadvantaged children from eastern cities to rural areas, primarily in the Midwest, to find homes and work on farms. Founded the Children's Aid Society in New York City in 1853 to address the plight of impoverished and orphaned children in urban areas. Okay, so this Lauren Brace guy, such a nice guy, creates this society for these orphaned and disadvantaged children. Keep this in mind. Specifically from eastern cities, only eastern cities, to rural areas, primarily the Midwest. This is the Foundling Hospital in New York City. You're going to realize when it comes to this orphan train thing, the hub or the cloning facility is probably in New York City.
Yeah.
Don't you guys find it very, very odd? Think about it for a second. You have a problem with orphans, right? These orphans are popping up and they're impoverished, right? Why didn't anybody in this entire country, I'm talking to you too at Princeton and Yale, why didn't anybody ask, why is it no other orphanage or anything exists anywhere else in the United States? Why is it that somehow, some way, only New York is producing orphans to be transported around the country? You mean out of all the rest of those states?
Good question.
Nobody else has any impoverished orphans with no parents that are in danger?
Good
Only
question.
in New York City?
why didn't we ask that question? That is hands down the most important question. If you have an orphan problem with children, aren't you going to have that problem all over the country? Different states? Randomly? But no, you got one centralized location where all the orphans are coming from. Why? 3 charitable institutions. Nah, they just made up institutions so that they can create an entity to funnel the money through. The institutions were supported by wealthy donors and operated by professional staff. The 3 institutions developed a program to place homeless, orphaned, and abandoned city children who numbered an estimated 30,000 in New York City alone in foster homes throughout the country. Again, advertising that these kids are endangered and they're in New York and they need help. The children were transported to their new homes on trains that were labeled orphan trains. 1854 to 1900s, estimated 250,000 children. Again, these children all came from New York. Why? Some children were placed by families who could not care for them at the time but expected to reunite with their children when circumstances changed.
Set up.
They are lying to y'all. They were cloning these children in New York and shipping them out. Look at this. Families who could not care for them at the time. I'm from New York. We don't give a fuck. We got one potato. We're gonna share and we're gonna cut up that potato. But we're not shipping our kid across the country on a train. Let's be real. Why were there so many orphans on the trains? Children with both parents living ended up on the trains or in orphanages because their families did not have the
baby
money
snatchers
or desire to raise them, or because they had been abused or abandoned or had run away. Do you see how they're literally trying to give you an excuse for the orphan children? Like, they're trying to tell you, they're trying to explain it into your head. This is all bullshit. A lot of us are parents, or any of you parents out there like, oh, this is just so hard. I'm going to have to put my kid on a train across the country. No, you're not. Especially when you know that, you know, if everybody knows about the orphan trains, everybody knows what's happening with the kids on the orphan trains, just like we all know what happens with kids in foster homes. Is the orphan train somewhere you'd want to send your kid? No. Meaning what? These kids do not have parents. They don't have parents. 250,000 kids? You need 2 parents? That's 500,000 people. Organizations did not care what happened to the children after they were placed and did not check in on them to make sure they were cared for.
Of course not.
Charles Lauren Brace, the man who organized this all. Without homes, call and see them. Homes wanted for children, homeless children. All these homeless children, they came out of nowhere, specifically in the city of New York only. Oh, and as you watch these pictures, you're going to realize something. There are no black children. And they were white slaves. Look, indentured. That's a slave. Own child every respect until shall arrive at the age of 21 years. You were supposed to take care of the child, and that child was indentured to you till it was 21 years old. Yes. They're picking cotton. Yes. It's picking cotton. And mind you, this is happening between the 1850s and 1920, 1930. I love where all the slavery is right about now. These kids look like they're out in the field. That looks like tobacco. Again, slaves. All coming from New York. But when the mind's blind, eyes can't see. Stay tuned for part 2, 3, and 4.
Did you know that in our not-so-distant past, babies were created and incubated en masse? This happened and was showcased as attractions at the World Fairs and even in New York's Coney Island. Can you even imagine carnival attractions where people paid to watch babies growing in incubators?
Which is weird to say the city that I reside in was one of those cities that had the World Fair and they had these exhibits.
Where were the parents? What happened to all the babies? Well, have you heard of the orphan trains? They were packed off and shipped out west to help repopulate the great Tartarian cities found abandoned across the land. They were sent
cities found abandoned, not built,
to humongous orphanages, and the people were able to get orphans to work their farms and factories. Free labor was abundant, and it was needed to rebuild after the last reset. There is loads of evidence showing that the original Cabbage Patch Kids were these orphans which people just simply picked up and took home like fresh produce. Many children were basically indentured servants and were subjected to lifelong slave labor and sexual abuse. Everything they taught you is a lie. America was covered with empty Tartarian cities, left to rot after the Great Reset, and those that followed grew a few millions babies to repopulate and rebuild. They dug out those cities and started over. Research Tartaria and ask questions. Suspend your disbelief. Like, follow, and share.
Make sure y'all leave y'all comments in this comment section below. And that'll do it for this video, y'all. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I want to know how y'all feel about that. Cabbage Patch Kids, Orphan Train. Less than 100 years ago. Get out here and do your research. The truth is out here. So if I get you guys a like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, peace out.